Good evening, Reds fans, and welcome to Red Sky Pods and live streams on this Wednesday night. The show tonight is about Mo Salah. Welcome to the panel. We've got Ian in the top left, and the bottom two guys for your entertainment this evening are Dave Powell in the bottom corner and Alex Lumley, who joins us for the first time tonight. So welcome, Alex. Welcome to the panel.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Obviously, all of you guys who watched this will have seen we started with a still of Ian St John. And before we talk about Mo Salah, it's right and proper that we speak about one of the legends of the club. So, quick one with the guys around the panel. We'll have a quick catch up on Ian St John's shares, thoughts, and then obviously we'll move on to the main subject. So, start with you, Dave, and just take a moment or two to capture your thoughts on Ian St John, please.
Yeah, but believe it or not, for those people that are watching, I'm not old enough to remember him as a player. Obviously, he's he goes down in Liverpool folklore, absolute legend of the club. My time really of knowing Ian St John was more on his show Saint and Greavesy, which Alex won't remember, but certainly Ian and yourself will, Steve. I tweeted earlier on today, there's been no, and I think Ian did yesterday. There's been no football show to rival it, in my opinion, in the last 30 years. That's still the pinnacle. The relationship that him and Jimmy Greaves had was fantastic on screen. They bounced off each other, infectious laugh. The guy was always smiling. I've seen Clive Tildesley, tweeting yesterday and today about the fact that he not only was he never not smiling, but he basically made everybody else smile around him. Just obviously seemed like a fantastic guy. A legend as a footballer and a legend on screen as well. And that word gets bandied around far too easily these days about anything really. You've only got to do one good deed and you're a legend, aren't you? So we've all done it. We've all said it. And he really was. He's earned that by his endeavours in his life. And R.I.P.
Thanks, Dave. Ian?
Obviously, never ever seen him play live. Bit before my time. I first came across Ian St John when my dad bought me a VHS tape called Shankly. And it was basically an hour-long documentary about Bill Shankly and the team he built and what they won and the players he had. And obviously, Ian St John was predominant in that VHS, and he was there. And I never just got to see the goals he scored and clips of him playing. I also got to see him speak and see him tell anecdotes about Bill Shankly. And it was something he was absolutely brilliant at. And if it was something that he was good at, he wouldn't have got his show that he got called Saint and Greavesy, which, like Dave said, it was absolutely fantastic. And it paved the way for what we've got now. And then he went on to do Radio City on the Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon of Liverpool playing, and he was the summariser there. And I always remember him doing the summarising on the radio as well. And then eventually went over to LFC TV and did a lot of stuff on there. So I remember him more about his punditry and his knowledge of the game and his football intelligence. And let's be no bones about it. He was an intelligent man and he knew his football. So he was a legend on the pitch, legend off the pitch. Rest in peace, the Saints.
Thanks, Ian. And obviously, Alex being the youngest in the panel, I assume, that full head of hair there, looking resplendent. Just a few moments from you, please, mate.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to sort of have the same experiences as Pauli and Ian in terms of getting to know him off the pitch with punditry and things like that. I mean, one thing I've noticed over the last few days is there's a lot of players that have probably come through the ranks at Liverpool, like Jamie Carragher, Steven Gerrard. There's been a lot sort of them talking about how good he was for them as like a mentor, having a bit of guidance just to understand Liverpool as a club, what it means to him and them. And he sort of allowed them to sort of come to him for advice and support. And as a youngster coming through, there's nothing better when you look up to people that are in the club that have been there and done it, whether it's at a low level or at this level, elite level, you need them around. So for me to see that today, even Andy Robertson, who hasn't been with us, long in comparison to those two guys, he couldn't speak highly enough of him. It seems as if everybody that meets him initially or first time, it's just infectious straight away. So yeah, rest in peace, and he's gone but not forgotten. So
Thanks, mate. My memories of Ian St John come largely through my dad, because like the rest of us, I never saw him play. The guy that scores the winning one of the goals in the '65 Cup final. We're not even thought of when he's doing that. So um, the easiest way for me to sum this up would be: we look at our current team and we talk about Jordan Henderson being the manager on the pitch, being in the embodiment of Jurgen Klopp on the pitch, being everything that Jurgen Klopp stands for in the shirt playing the game. Well, Ian St John was exactly that for Bill Shankly. My dad told me many, many stories about those players from those days. My uncle too. I think I'll close with an anecdote, and it made me smile because it's typical of Liverpool and it's typical of the man. Back in the '60s, all the churches in Liverpool used to have massive billboards outside them that used to put posters on them. And there was one in Allerton, and it said, "What would happen if Jesus came to Liverpool?" And somebody sneaked up in the middle of the night and wrote, "Well, we'd just move Ian St John to inside left, wouldn't we?" So I thought that's really spot on. That is how much the people of the city felt about Ian St John. And I echo the sentiments of Ian and Dave, who saw him on St Greaves. He's just a charismatic guy. There's a video going around of him dancing with one of the girls just outside of the tunnel prior to a game. And he tries to get her on the pitch to do it. It's a massive loss because we talk about players being woven into the fabric of the football club. And like Dave says, we say that too easily. But rest assured, Ian St John is one of the founder members of that fabric. He started what we are today. So God bless him, rest in peace, and my condolences and sympathies are with his family. Okay, now we've done that bit, guys, and thank you for that. It was really fitting and a nice way to pay tribute to a marvellous man. We're now going to talk about the subject matter for the pod, which is our four-season wonder, Mohamed Salah. So I just wanted to sort of go through some points, and we'll have a bit of a chit-chat and talk about some stuff and get your views, and we'll look at a number of things. So we'll start with Salah pre-Liverpool. Prior to coming to Liverpool, obviously, his journey into the Premier League and then away from the Premier League again, over to Serie A, and then obviously arriving back at us. Alex, just starting with you. We all do remember Mo Salah at Basel and then at Chelsea and then at Logan. So what were your thoughts in hearing that Liverpool were interested in him, having seen what he did at those three clubs? Where were you at in terms of how did you feel that Mo Salah might become a Liverpool player?
I think initially you always think about 36 million is a bit of a gamble for someone who's had the past that he had. Obviously, no doubt that he progressed well when he left Chelsea. Went to Fiorentina on loan, went to Roma on loan, then obviously got a permanent deal there. So a little bit sceptical. And I think as the years have obviously gone on, in Klopp we trust when it comes to transfers and stuff like that, and he's obviously excelled. So initially my thoughts were, would he do as well as what he's done now, or would he do better, or would he not achieve any success at all based on what we saw at Chelsea? So my initial thought was a little bit sceptical, but straight away in his first season scoring 32 goals, I think it just speaks volumes that there is someone out there, there is a system out there tailored for him, and luckily for us as supporters, it is for Liverpool. So, going back into his days at Chelsea, only 19 games, 10 starts. Just having a look at it, over the last couple of days, looking at the squad that Mourinho had at the time, Willian, Oscar, Hazard, Schürrle, they were sort of the four wide men that played in the three up top. If he went to a 4-2-3-1 with Fabregas and Matic holding. In Champions League games, he always went with Ramirez out on the right, just to have that solidarity in midfield, just to allow the other lads to sort of express themselves and link up with Costa. So he never really got a chance, and I just don't think Mourinho's way, as we've seen recently, there's certain players that suit him and there's certain players that don't, and I just don't think it never suited Salah's style. And I think him coming to Liverpool and coming to Klopp's, made him shine. So that's my thoughts on it.
Cool, thank you for that. So Dave, just coming to you. Obviously, when Salah left Basel to come to the Premier League, Chelsea were not the only club interested in him. We were. There were other clubs also interested in him. What was it that pricked the imagination of the bigger clubs in England about Mo Salah that saw him earn his move to Chelsea? Because by all accounts, he kind of turned us down to go there. So I'd be interested to sort of understand from a fan's point of view, what would the clubs have seen? Because he was very young, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, electric pace, yeah, but anyway, I remember watching, I think that season before, they played against Chelsea twice in the group stages. I think they went out Basel, but I think I'm right in saying he scored in both games. So it's easy to see why Chelsea would be interested in him. I remember being linked pretty strongly with him, Liverpool, and it seemed to happen a few times around about that time. There was a few sort of players that we were linked with. Certainly, Clint Dempsey, I remember that didn't happen. Gylfi Sigurdsson, that didn't happen. And Mo Salah was another one. And I remember being really disappointed actually because I remember thinking at the time, players that we had and players that we, and the way that we played, I thought he could fit into that. And he was very much a winger when he was at Basel. And I think that the classic case really of Chelsea's habit at the time of stockpiling and buying players that they perhaps don't necessarily need and therefore not using them. And there's other clubs that have done it. I'm not just criticising Chelsea, but Chelsea certainly had a way of doing that at that time.
Fair enough. So Ian, when the deal was going through, obviously he'd been in the Premier League, hadn't worked, had been on loan to Fiorentina, and he had a bit of a career at Roma. We were shelling out £36 million, as I rightly points out. Were you under or overwhelmed? How did you feel? Because obviously we've had a heritage of top draw, first class strikers. He didn't excite us all in the way that, say, signing Torres or a Collymore did in days gone by. So how did you feel when
I didn't want him.
Steve?
I didn't want him, Steve. I'm a very regimented red, and once you've knocked us back once, I don't want us to show any interest in you. He's knocked us back to go to Chelsea, and my view was, well, if it comes and it works for him, he's just going to get off when somebody comes in for him because he's already turned us down. He's got no loyalty to us. There's no loyalty in the game. I think when he went to Chelsea and City at the time weren't signing players that they needed. They were signing players to stop teams challenging them. And I think potentially Mo Salah, I'm not saying he would have done on his own at that age, but he would have made Liverpool a lot better. And I think Chelsea knew that. Chelsea have been doing it for years. They've been signing players that they didn't need, but to stop people getting to their level. It's something that they've done. So I didn't particularly want him. But once he signed and he had the red shirt and I was fully behind him, was I excited by him? I probably had the same feelings when we signed Marc Gonzalez. He wasn't a player that had blown me out of the water. I certainly didn't think he was going to go and score the goals he did. Because I was one of those that were rather stupidly excited about the signing of Marc Gonzalez. So I wasn't overly excited. I didn't particularly want him because he'd knocked us back first off. But as they say, the rest is history, Steve.
Absolutely. So I went to his home debut and he didn't even start. It was against Palace. And I was a bit underwhelmed, to be honest with you. I wanted sort of a big name striker. I wanted someone that was tried and tested and had delivered. And with Mo Salah, it was all about potentials, what the club had seen, and obviously he'd fitted the analytical side of the scouting system in terms of his running and his ability to recover and what he does and when he does it. The one thing I noticed straight away was that his acceleration was absolutely ridiculous. He came on against a Palace side and right near where we were sat, he just stretched his legs and his pace was absolutely ridiculous. For someone who can go from zero to flat out in a matter of strides, he's not the quickest guy when he's at full speed. There's plenty of quicker players around him, but it was how quickly he got there. And I remember thinking, hang on a minute, if we can utilise that and do that properly, you never know, it might turn out to be Mark Walters. Thanks, Lizo, for that one, mate. Yeah, so I thought, fair play, this lad's quality, and he's got a bit of pace about him, and give him a chance and get him indoctrinated into Klopp's system. Who knows? So yeah, that was pre-Liverpool. Never really stayed anywhere for any amount of time. I don't necessarily think that was his fault, but obviously now sitting here talking about him, I'm sure all four of us are glad his career went down the path it did, and he ended up at Liverpool. So the stats that we see running along on the ticker tape. So we'll come to you, Alex, first on that one. They speak for themselves. They're absolutely ridiculous. What's that one there? Win ratio is 63%. Look at those numbers. Talk to me a little bit about his numbers and what they represent and just how good those numbers make them.
Well, I mean, 188 appearances and 118 goals. You can't really sort of fault that, and I don't think any side in the Premier League would turn that down for a striker. I think he will have to certainly thank his teammates. You guys have spoke recently about systems and relationships on the pitch and things like that, and I think that's worked in his favour. As I said earlier, the Klopp system is tailored for him. It's great for him in the way we play. You can't fault him. He's selfish in front of goal, and you need them strikers in your side to win games, to go on good runs, to win titles. And thankfully he's been that for us. There's times where he's infuriating, but I personally wouldn't have him any other way based on the 4 seasons that we've had him, because that's the difference in winning 2-1 or drawing. This season's obviously been a little bit different. Some of the stats that I picked out based on the last few seasons, if you don't mind me sharing with you, are quite interesting in terms of dribbling, success rate and passing. His key passing in the first year we had was 1.7, average passes was 26.3, and his passing success was 76.7. And this year, his key passes is 1.4, average passes is 36.3, and his pass success is 84.6. And I don't know about you guys, but that when I looked at that alarmed me a little bit regarding how successful he was with less passes. But the pass success was obviously lower, but it was in his better seasons and better seasons for us. And I think a lot
of that is where we are this season. If you look at the way he's played this season, there's been lots of games where he's dropped deeper to pick the ball up. He's dropped to pick the ball off the fullback. He takes a touch and he plays it inside to the midfielder, then go and get it again. So he's playing a lot more. He's playing a lot more safer passes, which would be that would back up the stat that his pass completion rate, that last one I mentioned. So his pass completion rate is going to be higher.
Yeah,
I also think. Go on.
No, sorry, go on.
I also think in games like against Manchester United, when we've not played so well, and certainly against Manchester City at home, he went back to being a winger and he played very wide with the whitewash on his boots, as we all used to say in grassroots football. And he also tried to help Trent get through probably 6 or 7 games where his form was anything but what it should be. And I think those games and those positional things that he took up where he positioned himself to try and influence Trent's game a little bit more, I kind of wish he was a bit more selfish in that regard, rather than trying to facilitate Trent. Because at the end of the day, we would win games with him scoring goals rather than sort of babysitting a right back that was out of form a little bit. So they are interesting numbers, those. His passing is very, very underrated by everybody, including our own fan base.
I mean, I agree with both of you in what you said. In terms of this season, it's been a lot different, I think, for us in terms of personnel who have played with Salah and with Trent. I think the last couple of years we've been unbelievable with counter pressing, and that comes from the midfield three. There's been so many, even the centre halves at times. It allows people to push on. It allows people to counter press quicker. Therefore, the space is there for us to play passes to Salah. Salah's then playing less passes and getting into the box quicker. Nowadays, a lot of his passes are spent, like Pauli said, playing sideways passes or backwards because teams have got the low block. They've got sitting on their 18-yard box, and that's why it's taken us a bit more time to sort of find gaps for him to get into. I mean, for me, watching games a lot, I used to see a lot of passes from Trent that used to be whipped around the corner, and he'd be in between the centre half and the fullback. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think we've seen that as much in the last few months than what we have done in seasons. And those little moments are involved in the stats where he's making less passes, but the pass he's making are key passes because it's off the counter press and we're in 2v1, 1v1, and we're not having them moments anymore. And I thought I'd share those stats with you because it was so interesting. And even the dribbling stats, he's less than Bobby Firmino and Sadio Mane this year in terms of success rate.
I think he's carrying the can for the goals at the moment. So I would be understanding of your points, but grateful for the fact he's doing what he's doing. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we live in fear of our back four at the moment. Our transition has slowed down dramatically, and Gini Wijnaldum is not to blame, despite what Twitter tells you. I think generally there's an issue. We've not played with the system since we lost Gomez, purely because we couldn't. And Van Dijk is not only I've said this before, not only the best centre back in the world, he's actually one of the best footballers in the world. His intelligence to move a 60-yard pass, not a long ball, as Pauli would say, the right ball, to Salah, who then set the ball back to Trent, and that's when you'd see that ball played into that area. I think Liverpool are playing off-the-cuff football at the moment. I can't see a game plan. I can't see the press working too well. We've spoken about this. Thiago looks a little bit out of sorts in what we're asking him to do. There's so many contributory factors to putting square pegs in round holes. And all of those things would have had an impact on Salah. But gratefully for me, this season, he's scoring goals. Without his goals, just where would we be? Just slightly moving on, Ian. Graham Souness was very vocal on Sky Sports in recent times about Mo Salah being selfish, and Dalglish and Souness and players like that would have been really frustrated with him. I've got my opinion on that. What's yours?
I don't agree with it at all. I think in the positions where Mo Salah's in and he keeps the ball and he shoots and does that, if Mane had in exactly the same position, Mane would do exactly the same thing. And Bobby Firmino probably a bit less, because I think sometimes Bobby Firmino looks for the pass when it'd be better on just having a crack a goal. I don't agree with it at all. You don't get the numbers you get by not being selfish. Ian Rush was selfish. John Barnes, if the shot was on, he'd take the shot. It's about football being overanalyzed again. We're looking at every foot they put wrong. We're slowing it down so we can get to a place where you can see where everybody's available and where they possibly could have had the pass. Where 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have that luxury. We didn't see on the pitch the way we can now. I don't want the Mo Salah to change at all. I like that he's selfish. I like that he's hitting the numbers that he's doing. And if he wasn't hitting them numbers, we wouldn't have had the past 3 seasons we've had of him, because he wouldn't be the same player.
I agree. I'll just pick a point on that before I go to Dave. You make an interesting point about football sort of 20, 30 years ago. What I would say was, if Ian Rush was presented with the same chances Mo Salah gets, he'd be scoring 60 goals a season because he didn't miss.
Great.
There's the frustration. So quick one with you, Dave, on the same point and taken on board. And I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, Ian, not at all. Dave was a forward, I was a forward, obviously not of that standard. But what's your opinion on that? Because it was quite contentious and it split the fan base. So going back to the Souness comments, can you understand where he was coming from, Dave?
I do. Yeah, I do entirely. And I think I really like Graham Souness as a pundit. I've spoken before. We spoke about him the other week, didn't we? And I loved him as a player. I love him as a pundit. And I like his views. I like the fact he's forthright. I just think, and we all do as we get older, but I just think that he harks back to a bygone era, sometimes a little bit too much. And I do agree with Ian that things, 25, 30 years ago in yourself, Steve, that things weren't, they weren't overanalyzed because there wasn't the footage, so you didn't get that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? If someone wanted a scouting report on a player or another team, they'd have to go and watch them, and they might have to go and watch them 3 or 4 times. They wouldn't have every game on TV, and they wouldn't have all of the stats that they can pick up these days. So I do agree with Graham Souness in a way that the perception is that Mo Salah is selfish. But I also agree with Ian in the fact that he gets in that position, he's in the box. Sometimes he passes, and I'm like, why has he passed that? Because it seems so unnatural for him to pass when he gets in that. If it's on his left-hand side, there's times when I think, why doesn't he shoot? On his right-hand side, he doesn't shoot enough. And I've seen him score goals with his right foot. So, but to just label him selfish and say that he would be, dragged over the coals by another player because he's selfish, I think you need to see what else he brings to the team as well. And as you said earlier, Steve, the amount of tracking back he does is definitely overlooked. Definitely overlooked. People will pick up on the fact that Sadio Mane's tracked back 60 yards to help out Andy Robertson and get a tackle in, but Mo Salah did the same thing and no one will ever mention it. So you're not a selfish footballer if you're prepared to put that work and bring that work ethic to every single game you play in. And Mo Salah's definitely that. Definitely that.
Good points. I think, just to close on this topic, I think it's polarised by the fact that, and I've said this many times, he's capable of the sublime. And when I talk about sublime, the obvious one is the Chelsea goal, the Leicester goal this season, which was played back to him and with no backlift. What a beautiful finish that was.
Brilliant goal.
But he's also capable of the ridiculous, like when he missed against, when he only had the keeper to beat against Newcastle and didn't hit the target. I think that is picked up on by pundits today for all of the reasons that you guys have just said in terms of being able to freeze frame it. Monday Night Football's got a lot to answer for on Sky in terms of people's perception of football today. I think there's no place for that for me. It's ridiculous. They go to the nth degree. There is an argument to say he's not as clinical as he should be. If he was, imagine his numbers. But I can see Souness's point, but I can also see Ian's point. So I just thought I'd throw it out there to you guys and have a conversation with you about it because, as I say, it divided the fan base. So, moving on to the next little bit. Across the years, we've had some Liverpool Football Club have had some marvellous centre forwards. Torres, Fowler, Rush, we've spoken about them all. Dave, where does he sit amongst those guys? And it's difficult to do because we still don't know what's to come from him. But in terms of making comparisons, and I firmly believe we should make comparisons because it's what keeps our fan base alive and it's what connects the generations. Where does he sit in the pecking order amongst the Liverpool centre forwards or forwards rather?
I thought this would come up this season, Steve, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of days, and we had the numbers at the bottom there, and this will polarise opinion. I think not necessarily on this pod, but I think with our fan base. I think he's a legend. I think he is actually a club legend. In his 4th season with us, as you quite rightly said, Steve, a 4-season wonder. His first season numbers are ridiculous. They're absolutely ridiculous. And he hasn't done anything else like that in his career beforehand. He's been asked, I think, to come and change the way he played slightly. I didn't see a lot of him before he signed for us, but he asked to come and change his game slightly and play more as both him and Mane play as inside forwards. We play with a false nine, if you like, in Bobby Firmino, and there's a structure and a system to the way we play, which has proven to be really successful. He's won absolutely everything he could win in the club game. He couldn't win anything else. And I know you're not completely sold on this thought, Steve, but I think one of our greatest ever players never won the Premier League, Steven Gerrard, but he's still one of our greatest ever players. So I'm going to contradict myself a little bit by saying that if you win trophies, it should come into it. Where you are deemed in the pecking order of greats. Luis Suarez we talked about him the other week. He's as good as I've seen, but with very, very different players, Salah and Suarez. But I think you have to put them on the same keel because of the numbers and because of what he's brought to the club and the time that he's been with the club. Luis Suarez will make any team better, but I honestly believe at this moment in time, Mo Salah would make any team in the world better.
100%. And he is a club legend, by the way. I completely agree with you. Alex, I'm going to be really contentious now, and this really might upset a few people, but I'd like you to compare Salah to Mane, and I want you to pick one and give me reasons why you think one has the edge over the other one.
God, here we go. How's your debut? How is your debut? Do you know what? I was driving home this evening from work thinking, if I could sell one of them, who would it be? And that's the question you're asking. If I could pick, oh God,
I've nailed you, haven't I?
Yes, well and truly. I am gonna go with Salah. Purely and simply because of not just this season, like you said, it's not been a great year yet. He still scored 17 goals in the Premier League, and it's not been great for him. Can he play in different positions, like the striker? There's been times where we've tried to go over 4-2-3-1. Could he do that? Yes. And I think if we did bring in somebody else, would he play up top? Yes. And would he still give you the same amount of goals? Yes. I believe he would. Would Mane ever be able to play somewhere else in the front three? My personal opinion is I don't think he can, and I think that speaks for itself when you very rarely see both of them switch over. There's been a couple of times recently, especially on Sunday night against Sheffield United, where he was dropping sort of central to come in with Firmino, and yeah, it worked at times, but there was times where it didn't, and I think there's been moments where I've prayed at the TV to say get Salah up top, and when it does get a little bit cute in the final third, he can play off the shoulder, and I don't think Mane could potentially do that. So thinking about our sort of longevity and us maintaining success, winning the Premier League or being close to Man City, if you ask me who would I keep, I'd keep Salah. Because I do think that if our style does change and if our formation does change, I think he can play in any of those three positions, and I just don't think Mane could. But there's arguments for and against. I do think now people are slowly.
He's changed his mind now, Steve.
No, people are slowly starting to suss out Mane. In terms of them coming in, sort of stopping that inside channel when he's on the ball, and they're stopping. Obviously, this year with Robertson just holding a little bit back. If he's still going forward, they're still keeping that space locked inside. I think with Salah, I think he's got a different footballing brain to Mane, and I think that holds him in better stead than Mane does. So, in answer to your question, I would keep Mo Salah, and I'd sell Mane.
Very well articulated that, considering I put you on the spot, mate. Well done.
Yeah.
I think you make a really interesting point there about Mane and struggling this season. I think because I genuinely believe all of our problems stem from our back four, or rather the lack of one, in terms of being solidified and resolute doing the things it should do. And I think it's affected Ronaldo as well. So I don't see the three-man triangle down the left-hand side working at all this year, where Robbo will go in behind someone and pull a running up, and they'll try a little cute give and go, and suddenly Mane's in. We've spoken about this many times. Mane's trying too hard at the moment to try and rediscover some form, and it comes back naturally rather than trying to force it. No matter what level you played football at, you know yourself when things aren't going well and you try and push it, it doesn't work. So, yeah, it's a good answer to that. Thank you. So, Ian, I asked you before what you thought of when the news broke we were going to sign Salah, and you said you were underwhelmed, you didn't want him. Well, you've had 4 years to think about that thought now, haven't you, really? And you've seen the things that we've done. So, in the fourth year now, where's your mind at regards to now? How much high esteem do you hold Mo Salah?
Well, I'm going to go back to the question you asked Dave before, and how high he stands in past Liverpool players and where he stands in that. As far as I'm concerned, there are 3 players for me that stand above a certain line. It's Steven Gerrard, Kenny Dalglish, John Barnes. And just underneath that, there's another group of players like Stevie I, where he's like Ian Rushes, you know, really, really top class players, but probably wouldn't be one of the best players. I think if Mo Salah was to stay for another 2 years and stick on the same numbers, he could go above that line and join Gerrard, Dalglish and Barnes. That's how highly I think of Mo Salah. I think he's just cheating and being on one of the best we've ever had. I think he's the best on the right side we've ever had. I don't think we've had a better player on the right-hand side. I know he's classed as a forward and not a winger, but if you played a 4-4-2 and you played Salah on the right, and you picked an 11 and you wanted someone for your right, I couldn't look any further than Mo Salah now. That's how high I regard Mo Salah. He's an absolute playing and living Liverpool legend.
Absolutely, 100%, mate. Completely agree with you. He is, for me, he's right up there. His numbers are ridiculous. They really are. In a world where we live with a stupid system called VAR that does its level best to destroy football and chalk off goals, we've gone offside crazy, haven't we? So I think you're quite right. I think he's a couple of years away from being really the highest echelon in terms of Liverpool players. It's a really interesting response to that. So, on to the future. What does the future hold for Mo Salah? What does the future hold for Liverpool Football Club? Alex, you've not been privy to this conversation before. We have this conversation 2 or 3 times. Well, we have had it 2 or 3 times because it's a subjective point, and we know that footballers come and play for you and they love you, but ultimately, are they as loyal as we'd like them to be? In terms of the future, Mo Salah's future, immediate future and sort of longer term future, you'd have given some thought to this because we all have. What are you thinking? What are you seeing?
Well, obviously, it's been mentioned this week already that the former Madrid president said that Madrid are keen for him to go there, but they can't afford him. So part of me thinks, will he stay for a couple of years, like Ian said, just to stay at the highest level, and then when they come knocking and they've got financial backing, do they go in for him? And you speak of loyalty. Would he do that? Would he take that? Most likely, yes. I think it was sort of around the Palace win, wasn't it, when he was talking about a new contract and he wanted to go there. The papers come out and said about how he wanted to go to Madrid. Is he playing games? I don't know. It's difficult to read when you read it. Part of you thinks, I don't like the way it's been mentioned, but then you always have it in the back of your mind that it could potentially happen. I think Liverpool have been extremely good to him. in terms of facilitating his religious beliefs, his family, everything they've done for him. Would Madrid do the same? Yes, they would. They've got a few players that have the same sort of preparations that him and Mane do. So I'd like him to stay for 2 years, 3 years, probably even till the end of his career. Will he do it? I don't think he will. But I do think in those 2 years, would we see another manager? Would we see a different style? It remains to be seen. And would he suit that? Because previously, he's only had one manager that he's been good under, and that's Jurgen Klopp. So would he do better for someone else? I go back to saying about how he could play in a different position. I could see him playing as an out and out number 9, playing on the end of a defender, just playing off of his shoulder. I think he could do that. So I think the next 3 or 4 years will be interesting for him and see how he adapts and develops as a footballer, because he will have to change, because it happens in football. I can't see the way that we play being the only way to be successful. I think it will change again. We've seen in the past that it has done. So I'd like him to stay for a couple more years so we get the best out of him. But I will always have in the back of my mind that he will go to Madrid, probably more so than Barcelona, because Barcelona will, that I can't see them changing their style of play, and I don't think he would suit it. So I'd like to get a good 2-3 years out of him. But I'm not, if you were to say, am I confident he'll do that? I'm not too sure.
So I've shared the opinion that in his home country, Mo Salah's very ambassadorial. There's an awful lot for the poverty and the plight of the people that don't have so much from his home country. Real Madrid might give him $350,000 a week, which we will never do because our wage structure doesn't go there. As Dave alluded to before, he's won the trophies, he's won the Premier League, he's won the European Cup. At some point, I see money and the ability to build his home country, because he's a very humble man. I see that as a factor in his decision. And I think that will be a bigger factor as time goes on. So I share your view that much as I'd like him to, I'm not confident. I think that needs to be tested this summer. We've spoken about that. So with this summer in mind, Ian, if Liverpool were to receive offers from Mo Salah, we're going to put you in the shoes of Mr. Edwards. How much do you want for him? And who's likely to buy him if it's not Real Madrid?
I think the only 2 places he'll go to is it's either Real Madrid or Paris Saint-Germain. Especially if Paris Saint-Germain end up losing one of their strikers. Wink, wink. But no, I'm with you guys. I want him to stay. I think a lot of the talk of him going though is driven by a lot of football Twitter and some of our own fans, because what tends to be happening with this FIFA generation is it's like if you turn 30, your legs fall off. People are too interested in other people's what money people are on and what they can get. It was just based on players on what they're doing on the pitch, and he's never shown any inclination to leave. His head doesn't go down. He looks happy at Liverpool. If he stop over-analysing everything, I don't see a reason why he would go. We're not going to go to Barcelona right now. Barcelona look like they're in as bad a season we're having this season. Barcelona are even worse, I'd say. They look like they're in bad shape on and off the pitch. Real Madrid, he's been and signed for what you would call a Galactico in the British Galactico, in English Galactico 3 years ago with Chelsea. And it didn't work out for him. He used to say he goes to Real Madrid, plays 6 or 7 games. They don't get the Real Madrid. They don't get the most out they've had at Liverpool. And all of a sudden he's benched. He's got it good at Liverpool. Don't get me wrong, he's given so much to Liverpool. But Liverpool and Liverpool fans, majority, have given him so much. So the only reason I think he goes is financially. If somebody comes in and offers him over 250, 300 grand a week. If he goes, it's for financial reasons. Because apart from this season, which has been absolutely hammered by injuries, are there many better teams in Europe than us right now? If you take away the absolutely horrendous injury list we've had this season, I think he's a smart man. I think he knows that.
Fair enough, fair enough. Dave, Alex alluded to it before, and I think it's an interesting point that he raises. Mo Salah's quite a private man, doesn't do interviews per se, but yet spoke to Marca, the Spanish newspaper, about potential moves to Real Madrid. We spoke to a journalist that purely looks after Liverpool Football Club almost right after that. And he said that's an agitation. It's exactly right. It's playing mind games with the club in terms of going into a contract renegotiation. And at this point in time, Liverpool have no plans to renegotiate his contract. If he was to go, and it's a big if, and the way things have gone this season, do we change like for like? If so, who? Or do we, in your opinion, do we consider a change of system and go for a more orthodox approach up front? I've been thinking about this and I can't make my mind up. So I'll throw it over to you and see what you think.
I'll be torn on that as well. And the reason I'll be torn on that is that I'm not sure who would be the right people to come in. I've said before about some people that Liverpool could potentially target. In my opinion, whether any of those are realistic is another matter. If Liverpool were to, personally, I think Mbappe is pie in the sky. I honestly can't see that ever happening. Because, as you said earlier, Steve, about our wage structure, Haaland, I think, is more of a possibility. But I think if Haaland comes, there's probably a slight change in the way we play. And if Haaland comes, then I think you need to sign someone else as well. To be honest with you, I think if Haaland signs, I don't see most others staying at the football club. And that's nothing to do with their playing the same position, because they don't. But I just think you would need someone who was slightly more a traditional winger rather than where Mo Salah plays at the moment, which is more of an inside forward. He plays inside to go out. So I really do think that the transfer window probably maybe this one, just to see how things go financially, economically for all football clubs around the world. But probably the next two transfer windows the next two summer transfer windows will let us know what happens there. But if not Haaland, then yeah, what do you do? I think you've got no choice really, but go like for like. But I think with Bobby's powers waning slightly, I think he needs to have some. He needs to have some competition, and B, I think he needs to perhaps play in a slightly different position in the team. Maybe play slightly deeper, and have some time out of the team as well. Diogo Jota coming back in, we do have somebody else that can provide us goals and play. Certainly play right or left. I'm not sure he'd be too comfortable playing in that central position, but he can certainly play right or left. And then it's who else is out there. Saka at Arsenal would be a really interesting one as far as I'm concerned. I said about that the other week. I think he brings the same kind of attributes. I'll see what Lizo's put there. Harvey. I mean, Harvey's done well, but he's a different kind of player to Mo Salah. He might play in the same kind of position, but he's very, very different in terms of what he does. I see Harvey Elliott more as a playmaker who's playing from the right hand side, as opposed to a forward who's playing from the right hand side. And let's not kid ourselves as well. Harvey Elliott's still only 18 years old, so his numbers are good at Blackburn. He's done well, but I think you'd be asking a lot of the kids to come in and be Mo Salah's replacement if that were to I don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah, definitely with you, Steve. Torn right down the middle.
So I'm going to put a question to all three of you before we sort of go to the final point with regards to Mo Salah. So let's speculate and play a little game here, and you have to humour me here, guys, because it's by no means a done deal. I'm not suggesting it would be. Let's assume £120 million and Mo Salah's a Real Madrid player, and Liverpool signed Haaland and Jack Grealish. How do you feel, Alex?
I'm going to have to stand with Pauli in terms of the style of play, like the identity of what we would need to have for Haaland. And Grealish is somebody that I don't think he'd supply to Haaland the way that he probably gets the same at Dortmund at the minute.
Let me just cut in there. Sorry, I've got a theory that Grealish would, under the right manager, would be an unbelievable and almost unplayable number 10. Pull him off the left hand side and get him more involved in the game because he drifts in and out of the game a little bit sometimes at Villa. He's certainly got the ability to pick up the ball and ask questions. So let's play a little game. Assume Klopp's seen that for himself, and you think about changing our shape, and you think about moving Grealish if you signed him more centrally, and then bringing in a Haaland. I'm just playing games here. How does that work? How do you think that works? Because if we do sell Salah, or he does leave at some point, the likelihood is, unless you sign Mbappe, and I kind of agree with Dave, unless Nike pays wages, that's not going to happen. Then that warrants a change in our style. And I'm just throwing it out there to see if there's permutations out there in world football that would work.
So if you bring Grealish centrally, that's what you're saying, aren't you? Bring him more as say like a 10.
Yeah,
10,
exactly.
Yeah, in there. So we're looking to go as a 4-2-3-1. So we've built. I would say we've had success in having three lads in there that have combated the midfield: Fabinho, Henderson, Wijnaldum, and like you said earlier, Gini's great for Robbo and Mane, and Henderson's even better, I would say, for Salah and Trent. Straight away, you're having to change your style. So you've got to allow time for that to build. And my question after that is do we have time to go through another transitional period? Potentially. I don't. And I
would that have to change that much, though, Lammers? Sorry to interrupt you. Would that have to change that much? Because we all know that our fullbacks are an essential part to the way that we play. So if Haaland's playing up front and he plays in a 2, which I think this is the game that Steve's playing here, by the way, and it goes a bit more traditional, and you have Grealish playing off of them, so in effect you're playing a midfield diamond, tight and narrow. You're not losing that midfield 3, but what you're saying to Grealish is you've got freedom to roam. You go and do what you want. You're a really good ball carrier. We'll try and get you on the ball. Going back to yesteryear a little bit like Liverpool did with Steve McManaman. And I remember something John Barnes said that whenever he got the ball, the first thing he did was try and find McManaman, because McManaman could get him up the pitch. He could get him up the pitch 50 or 60 yards with his ball carrying, and you're relieving the pressure straight away. So you've got your 2 up front, Haaland and whoever. Let's speculate and say Salah's gone, and we'll say that it's Mane. Grealish is playing off of them. You've got a midfield 3 of whoever they might be. Again, speculating, say that's your usual 3. You've got your 2 centre halves back in position. You've got your goalkeeper back in position. You've got your fullbacks, both of which are not really having to change their game at all, playing as fullbacks and as they played so far. You've also got a target to it in the box, 2 targets in the box probably, with crosses. So is it changing that much? That's my question.
My opinion is that I think it would. I think it would change. We haven't sort of built what we've built overnight. It's taken relationships for the last few years, consistency, having the same team week in, week out. We've seen this year we have 3 or 4 guys drop out the side. the lads that we've got in aren't good enough. I genuinely believe if you brought in someone like Grealish and Haaland, would they give us glimpses in a season of it going well? Yes. Would it be consistent enough based on what we've seen before? I don't think so, but opinions may be different. But I do believe that there will come a point where we will have to change the way we play because it won't bring us success anymore. So my opinion of having Grealish and Haaland in both and taking Salah out, I wouldn't say yes to it.
That's fair enough. I was just getting a bit of devilment. Right, so I'm going to open up my last point with Ian before we close. It's been good, this guys. I've enjoyed it. Bit of cheekiness, bit of conflict, a bit of contentious questions. All good. So, Salah's career at Liverpool's finished. He's sitting at home in Egypt with his feet up, and we're all sat around a table deciding Premier League strikers, who's the greatest, who's number one, who's number two, so on and so forth. My personal opinion is Thierry Henry is the best striker the Premier League's ever seen. Ian, in terms of Mo Salah and the greats that we've seen, your Drogbas, your Nistelrooys, your Henrys, Bergkamps, Shearers, and all of those people, when it's all said and done, if it ended at the end of this season, and I'm not saying it will again, because people will jump down my throat for saying that, where does he rank, in your opinion? Who does he rank alongside? How far up that ladder does he go?
Well, when you're talking about the Bergkamps, the Thierry Henrys, the players like that, I think they're just above Salah on longevity alone and how long they stay with their teams. And I think that's the only question about Mo Salah. I think his ability is just as good as those players. The fact is he's only been at Liverpool 4 seasons. If he'd have been at Liverpool 7 or 8 seasons, I don't even think it'd be a question. He'd be right up there with one of the very, very best in the league. So if he was to stay for another 2 seasons, like we mentioned before, I think he'd be one of the very, very best. The numbers speak for himself. And you look at this season, he's in a Liverpool team that is not doing particularly well. There's not scoring a vast amount of goals, and he's still the leading goal scorer in the Premier League. Tells you everything, absolutely everything. The only thing that the difference between the players you've mentioned and Mo Salah is how long he's been at the prospective clubs. If he stays longer, he's up there as one of the very, very best.
Cool. Okay, Dave, your thoughts? Who's he comparable to? I don't think. I think he could stay at Liverpool for the next 5 years. I don't think he gets Thierry Henry heights. That man was. I remember Jamie Carragher said when he goes past you, it's like chasing someone's riding a motorbike. You just don't get anywhere near him. I can't tell you how highly I rate Thierry Henry. It might be evident from this conversation, but where do you kind of fit him in around the greats?
Well, first and foremost, I agree with you on that. I think Thierry Henry changed the face of football as we saw it in this country by basically playing as a centre forward that didn't play through the middle hardly ever, and basically just, if you like, Arsenal at that time really they changed the face of football in this country. They did, whether anybody likes it or not. They did. People said about Barcelona starting with all this false nine and those things, but Arsenal started all that with Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp. So, absolutely brilliant player. I'm also a massive Shearer fan, and I think his numbers are unbelievable. If you actually look at his numbers, it's incredible. That probably a record that, well, it would take some player to beat him. Ian said about longevity. Someone's got to be around for a long time to beat Alan Shearer's record. So
just on that one, Dave. On this subject, I read just today that to beat Alan Shearer, someone would have to play for 9 consecutive seasons to score over 30 goals in every season. That's never going to happen, is it?
Exactly. I mean, you thought Harry Kane was doing great. But he is doing great. He's, fantastic numbers again. And then you look at what else he'd have to do to actually get level with Shearer, and the age he is now, and it's never going to happen. So those, as far as I'm concerned, if you're picking an all-time Premier League 11, and let's not forget that football did happen before 1992. If you're picking an all-time Premier League era 11, those two are a shoo-in, absolute shoo-in. You might pick one other forward there as well, and that one other forward, if you were playing three up front, one other forward could be Mo Salah. I think he's that high up the charts. He scores that many goals. No one's going to like me for saying it, but he's above Robbie Fowler. In terms of his impact and what he's achieved. And obviously, I love Robbie Fowler. Every Liverpool fan does, but he's above Robbie Fowler for me. So there's a whole host of names. Luis Suarez, Fernando Torres. I mean, loads of them are our club. And there's a load of players that have done well in fits and starts and not gone on or not done it for as long. But I mean, we're talking about 4 years. I mean, actually, 4 years is a long time to be at one club in this day and age. So, end of this season, he'll be on 120 odd goals for the club in around about 200 appearances. Phenomenal. He's, to use Ian's analogy from earlier about Liverpool players, Shearer and Henry, I think he's in the next bracket down.
Fair comments, those, Dave. Can't really disagree with that. So, Alex, get your take on the subject. Where do you rank him amongst the all-time greats?
I agree with you regarding Henry being the best. One of the games that stood out for me for Henry is, I think it was Real Madrid away in the Champions League, where he's just gone on an unbelievable run and got them to the final. Not to say that I'd like to see us in that position where you've got one player sort of not dragging us to finals or dragging us to, because it's harsh to say that about Arsenal because they had not a bad side then, but they had better previous years. I think for us to sort of maybe put Salah into that next bracket, he doesn't have to do it, but is he doing it this year? Yeah, he is. Scoring goals still in a bad season. Could he do it again for the next 2-3 years? Yes, potentially with our main players back. I wouldn't put him up there with the people you've mentioned about Shearer and Henry, but he's certainly got the ability to be that and to do that in the next 2-3 seasons if he stays with us. Coutinho leaving, I know it's not the same player, but he could have been up there as one of the greats and he's missed his moment. I just hope that Salah doesn't do the same because he could be a great next 3 years, probably score similar amount of goals. So I wouldn't put him up there, but he's definitely got the ability to be up there. And yeah, fingers crossed he does. Definitely.
Cool. My personal opinion is, taking the names that we've spoken about, Alan Shearer was the number 9 personified, wasn't he? He was arguably your best line leader, number 9 you could have. Before he had 2 ACLs, not 1, 2. To come back from that and be where he was tremendous. At Southampton, he had pace, he had power, he had directness. He lost a bit of his pace with his ACL, as they all do, or they did then when technology wasn't what it was today. But his numbers, I don't think his numbers will ever be topped. I really don't. I think Salah is every bit as good as a Drogba in terms of what he's delivered. I think he's every bit as good as a Van Nistelrooy in terms of what he's delivered. So yes, I've got him on the plateau just below the elite superstardom. And for me, I've got Thierry Henry head and shoulders. And the reason why is all of the players we talk about, Salah played in the system. Drogba was a number 9. Shearer was a number 9. Henry was an enigma. Nobody told him what to do. They just let him go out there and do whatever he wanted in a very disciplined side. And he just took them to a level that was ridiculous in terms of his contribution. And then he went to Barcelona and slotted in at Barcelona like he had Mr. Heartbeat in there too and had lots to their front line. That's when you speak of generational, I really don't like that term because I genuinely think you can only say generational when players' careers are over. And you could say who's the best of their generation, like like Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, was the best of his generation, so he would be generational. I think Henry was generational in the Premier League. If Mo Salah stays for 3 or 4 more years, and I hope he does because he's got a lot to offer, he'd probably be the closest person to Shearer and Henry that I would have seen in terms of their impact. I think Shearer was ridiculous, and obviously I've said what I've said about Henry. I think Mo Salah's massively underrated. I really do, and that sounds ridiculous with the numbers that we've seen that he doesn't get the respect that he deserves, but he doesn't.
Steve, by some of our own fans as well, Steve.
Yeah.
Say again.
By some of our own fans as well. I think he's
Exactly right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, we could talk about our Twitter fans all night, guys, and there's lots of things they do that you despair at. But the sort of movement for footballers, that fans that understand the game and don't dig out players who play in the system and don't understand what their role is. Mo Salah's incredible, absolutely incredible. So, Rooney needs it. There you go. That's quite right. That guy belongs in the conversation as well. Absolutely, he does.
Yeah.
You can't argue with that. So yeah, that's the player that's probably above a Drogba or tremendous player over the years. So he's right up there in the conversation. He'd be at the top table, wouldn't he? If you had a top table of 6, Rooney would be there, Mo would be there, Henry would be there, Shearer would be there, Drogba would be there. We'd got maybe a Van Nistelrooy. So we've been blessed with great centre forwards. And the really good thing is that Mo's doing it for us. Those numbers that are running along the bottom of the screen, by the way, are as good as any of the players that we've mentioned, if not better.
Yeah.
So that brings to the end our show on Mo Salah. And it's been really good. It's been really good to have you on board, Alex. Enjoyed your insight. So thanks for
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I'll have you on again, mate. I'll find some more
100%.
difficult questions for you to answer. Don't you worry about that.
Curveballs.
So cheers, Parley. Cheers, Ian.
Yeah. Well done, fellas.
Take care, guys, and we'll see you on Thursday when we have a little look at our game against Chelsea. So thanks again.
See you later, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.